Ladies and gentlemen, at the moment, Cyril Ramaphosa seems to be scoring a lot of political own goals to the point where the ANC itself is looking at him and thinking to themselves, well, Cyril's actually now become a liability. So it appears that it may only be a matter of time before Cyril Ramaphosa is removed from office. But before we get on to the main video of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to support the work that I do here, you're welcome to buy me a coffee. You know the drill. In any case, let's get on to it. And so, as you know, Cyril Ramaphosa has repeatedly, not just once, he's done it more than once now, praised DA municipalities for their clean audits and better governance. The first one was at the ANC's councillors meeting, which I drew reference to last week, and now again before Cabinet. Now, his comments have triggered open revolt inside the ANC, with NEC members, cabinet ministers, and provincial leaders accusing him of de-campaigning the ANC by elevating its rival, obviously being the DA. Now, some insiders went as far as to call for the president's resignation, whilst the ANC Youth League initially demanded disciplinary action. Now, the DA has done exactly what we all thought they would do, because if you were smart and you were going to do forms of propaganda marketing as a result of what Cyril said, the DA has done exactly what you would expect them to do. They've seized on the opportunity, with John Steenhuisen pointing out that even the ANC's president admits where the DA governs, it delivers. Now, Cyril's kind of had to backtrack on what he said and try to protect a little bit of face, and so what he's now said is that clean audits doesn't mean clean streets. But unfortunately, the damage for Cyril has been done, with some analysts describing this as a political own goal that boosted the DA in the run-up to the 2026 municipal elections. Now, the ANC leaders have argued that whilst DA municipality get clean audits, the ANC is the one driving transformation and uplifting communities. So, according to Cyril, the DA gets clean audits, the ANC changes lives. That's the slogan he's going for. Now, Ramaphosa's line about learning from Cape Town was especially controversial, with many opponents claiming that he's undermining the ANC's brand at a fragile moment nationally, with some insiders in the NEC saying that they see the comments made by Cyril as a signal of his potential exit strategy, flouting ideas of stepping down whilst using his presidencies to secure legacy reform. So, effectively, according to some NEC members, Cyril's deliberately scoring his own goals in order to prompt other ANC members to encourage Cyril to resign. So, if that's the idea, it's a rather smart one. Now, the DA has not only flouted its record of clean audits, but also said that it would assist failing ANC municipalities if service delivery was prioritized over political squabbles. So it's a bit like saying, yes, we do better. And if you'd like us to help you, ANC, we'll help you. We'll do you a solid. We'll help you out. It's just a way for them to kind of rub their own clean audits in the noses of the ANC. Now, this contrasts sharply with many ANC-run councils, which dominate the Auditor General's reports of failing municipalities. So it's not hard to see why the DA would take this approach. But you see, there have been other own goals, because as you know, the next big goal is obviously Trump's tariffs. And essentially, this is the news that, as you know, the US slapped South Africa with 30% tariffs. Now, as you also know, this threatened tens of thousands of jobs, as South African exports like cars, citrus, and wine lost some of their competitiveness. Now, what you don't know is that AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, is due to expire, and experts warn that Trump is unlikely to renew it given his tariff-first approach. Now, there has actually been no legislation submitted to the US Congress to renew it. So at this point in time, it's not going to renew. And for some reason, the ANC seems to have only just become aware of this. We've all been talking about it for some time, but the ANC has now said, well, we need a roadmap for trade talks, but relations are at a historic low. And this has all been worsened by the ANC's ties with Russia and Iran. So basically, they have now noticed they're losing AGOA. They've suddenly, at the last moment, said, we need a roadmap. We need to somehow talk. But the US isn't really prepared to talk. because of the ANC's allies in Russia and Iran. And so now they're going, oh, this isn't good. At the same time, Congress has introduced a second anti-South African bill. I covered this in a number of videos last week, all aiming to review the bilateral relationship with South Africa, potentially sanction ANC officials, and potentially remove South Africa from AGOA altogether. But then, with that being said, AGOA just isn't really likely to renew anyway. Now, in response, the ANC has also upset the Public Forum Director General at the WTO, who blasted South Africa directly for blocking the Investment Facilitation for Development, the IFD Pact. Now, they said that South Africa had effectively voted against this measure, which would help struggling third world countries, and they called South Africa's stance ideological and unfair to poor nations that desperately need investment. Now, 2/3 of the WTO members, including 75 developing countries, had signed on, but the countries that effectively blocked full adoption were South Africa, India, and Turkey. You'll notice that 2 of those members were BRICS members. Now, the Director General argued that the pact would have been a game changer for Africa, attracting new capital by signaling investor-friendly standards. And there's a whole reason for this, and I won't get into it. But from what we can take from this is that South Africa has yet again scored an own goal by failing to back the adoption of the pact. But in any case, despite all the trade chaos caused by the ANC's own goals with Trump's tariffs, AGOA, and the WTO clash, there is some good news, and that is South Africa's citrus sector is thriving. Farmers expect record export this season, with 118 million cartons of citrus being sent out of the country. Oranges, as an example, are up 15%, but grapefruit exports are lagging behind forecasts, and all of this is being attributed to improved port efficiency, favorable weather, and a booming juice demand in the EU and the Northern Hemispheres, which have all helped to offset US tariffs. Now, this all becomes interesting because the own goals haven't stopped here. We have to now move on to the next own goal, and that will be Eskom's death spiral. Because in other news, Glencore, one of the world's largest commodity producers, has begun closing smelters in Rustenburg and Lydenburg, laying off workers in, their operations. Now, South Africa has 80% of global chrome reserves, but unreliable and overpriced electricity has shifted stainless steel production to China, which enjoys far cheaper energy and labor. So why have they done this? Well, it's because Eskom's tariffs rose by 937% between 2007 and 2024, while inflation rose only 115%. Energy costs now eat up 40% of production costs for many of these firms. So since 2008, electricity has gone from 19 cents per kilowatt to 165 cents per kilowatt, with energy-intensive sectors such as steel, mining, and manufacturing now all facing collapse because of the unsustainability of Eskom's costs. That's their costs of operation, and we must remind ourselves that the reason that the cost is so high is because of lack of maintenance and the fact that at the moment, as you would have seen, and I covered in a recent video, the reason we don't have load shedding is because we're burning diesel, which is a very unsustainable way and a very costly way to power a country. Now, while we're talking about Eskom, we should really talk about Andre de Ruyter, because Andre de Ruyter has now argued that the current BEE policies enrich connected elites, scare off investors, and add unnecessary burdens. And we'd say, we know this, Andre, so why are you telling us this? And so he proposes a means-based empowerment, not a race-based quota system, and a moratorium on equity transfer requirements for foreign investors. And to this I would say, yes, we know, de Ruyter, why again are you telling us this? This is nothing different from what the DA and the Free Market Foundation have all proposed. Now, the reason is because economists warn that unless BEE and expropriation policies are all scrapped, no major deal with the US is possible, which will lock South Africa out of vital capital inflows. We need those capital inflows. The government is currently destroying the state through its own ineptitude, and we need money coming in to fund the programs that we have. And we should really couple this with the next story. And this is the story that the Auditor General has reported that 644 million in unpaid audit fees, which include many state-owned enterprises such as Denel, SAA, and Mango, are all going to have to be written off because many of those entities face liquidation, and a lot of it is due to state capture and theft of funds from those entities themselves. Now, the Auditor General has a large amount of monies that they're owed by these individuals, and they can't get paid, so they're losing out on money. Now, in the other news, Treasury, the AGSA, and the have all revealed systemic payroll fraud costing at least 3.9 billion a year, with fake employees, deceased workers still being paid, with minors on a payroll and duplicate profiles all siphoning funds. Now, departments must physically verify every employee by February 2026, with biometric systems being tested. So we have 644 million being written off in unpaid audit fees from the Auditor General, and another 3.9 billion rand each year because of, well, fraud in the payroll government system. And if you thought all of that was bad, well, it actually goes from bad to worse, because one of these state-owned enterprises, namely Denel, has, after 18 years and 7.7 billion rand being spent, not one of the planned 244 infantry fighter vehicles that had been ordered from that department. Now, this effectively was a government contract with Denel worth 7.7 billion rand, and Denel had to produce these 244 vehicles, but none of them have actually been built nor delivered to the government departments. Now, Denel admits it cannot complete the project and says that it was gutted by state capture under the Guptas. Now, despite having paid 7.7 billion rand, the orders have now been cut down to 88. So that's 88 from 244. And Denel holds 1.5 billion in unfinished parts and sub-assemblies. So there we've got another 7.7 billion spent on a department that frankly hasn't delivered. And in any normal country, that minister would be fired. In fact, let us not forget that the whole deal, the arms deal with Jacob Zuma, that whole catastrophe, that was worth less than the 7.7 billion rand spent. And so we have to ask the question, where the freak did the 7.7 billion rand go? Now, you may look at that and say, okay, well, what does this actually mean? Well, in other news, 2.58 trillion rand is being spent in expenditure by the South African state. And of this, the majority is going through to public wages at 724 billion rand and debt servicing at 1.2 billion rand a day. A day. That's not a year, that's a day. This makes the budget rather rigid, leaving little room for infrastructure or growth initiatives. Government employs 37,839 workers earning over 1 million rand annually. So yes, if you want to become a millionaire in South Africa, go work for the government. And this is costing 45 billion rand a year to the taxpayer. Now, Treasury is attempting early retirement schemes to cut these costs, but the system remains bloated. So what can we take from this? Well, there's a lot of money being stolen out the system with people actually just flat out stealing it. That theft of funds means that there are numerous SOEs that have gone bust. And as a result of these entities going bust has caused us a debt. We can see money going into places like Denel. Nothing's actually getting delivered from it. And we can even see it in the government payroll system, where we've got a significant amount of people earning a significant amount of money, and some of them don't even exist. And so this is actually causing our debt to rise from 26% to what it is now. It is now at 76% of GDP. So there is no fiscal space to do anything but pay some government employees, half of which don't exist, and service debt costs. Now, corporates are sitting on 1.5 trillion in cash, which they could invest in the economy, but they've all said that they would be unwilling to invest due to low business confidence. with economists now arguing that the only way for South Africa to actually have any form of growth is to deregulate. Deregulate is the only way. The private sector has to come in as a viable option. Otherwise, South Africa must beg the IMF and the World Bank for loans, but they immediately know that these loans are going to payroll and to debt servicing. They are not going to be spent on infrastructure and growth initiatives, which means that we're never going to get out of this debt trap. We are now in a debt trap that's been caused by the ANC. So yet again, another ANC own goal. The ANC's caused the problem, and now the rest of the country has to live with it. And unfortunately, business confidence in South Africa has only really been positive 3 times since 2008, and has never been consecutively. In the 2000s, we averaged 4% GDP growth, and we added 500,000 jobs a year. But this was due to Thabo Mbeki's friendliness with private sector and with private capital in order to grow a private market. But in the past decade, growth has averaged 0.8%, which is compared to every other emerging market who have grown at 4.5%, which shows that South Africa is lagging behind everyone, and it's all because of the ANC's policies. So yet again, another ANC-owned goal. And if South Africa matched its peers, if we actually did what everybody else did, the economy would be 4.1 trillion rand larger, and the government would have 5 trillion rand more in revenue to spend on all the bullshit projects that they want. They could have that NHR no problem. They just have the money. They could improve all the grants and pay people more money. They just have the money. But you see, our government is retarded because, as we've been told numerous times, ANC policy comes first, ANC ideology comes first, and despite all of it being strangled by corruption and fiscal mismanagement, the ANC just doubles down on the usual bullshit that they have because they score own goal upon own goal upon own goal. And they're at that point now that if they change tack, everybody just calls them a bunch of sellouts and that they're self-sabotaging and whatever other ANC nonsense that these guys talk when they have their own little conferences. But the reality is the ANC screwed up. They've screwed up everything, but they don't admit it. They say the only way to fix it is by doubling down on all the bullshit that got us here in the first place. And that's why the ANC is failing. And nobody's going to vote for it. And let's be honest, Cyril's probably going to go by the end of the year. Now, this in itself, I want to end off with one point, and that is, we made the prediction that Cyril would go by the end of the year because the G20 would be over. Cyril made it very clear when he resigned prior to the last administration ending. He made it very clear that he only really wanted to be around for the big events. He wasn't going to do all the small stuff. He wasn't going to sweat the small thing. Ministers must get on with it, but he's effectively been an absent president. And we all made the prediction that Cyril would go when all the big events were finished. That's the G20 and all the other things that we were due to host. And that will all be finished this year. And would you know, Ramaphosa is already putting himself in a position by saying things that are calling for his sacking and his head to roll and for him to go because of things that he said. So in other words, he almost seems to be doing this deliberately so he can go at the end of the year. Because let's be honest, the ANC are going to get a parding in 2026. And no political leader in their right mind wants to actually leave the party at that point because the blowback, the finger pointing at whoever is the leader, the figurehead at that point in time will be astronomical. And so the likelihood of Cyril going by the end of the year is, well, it gets higher every day. In any case, these are just my views. Do let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until tomorrow, bye.